Good morning. It's 8:30 and a very good Sunday morning to you. I'm Dennis House, and thanks for tuning in for Face the State. Bob Stefanowski and Ned Lamont are pounding each other on social media after taking a pounding during the primary election campaign. So how is that working out, and how are voters reacting? With us today is polling guru Doug Schwartz of Quinnipiac University. Always a great guest to have on your program because you come chock full of information and all sorts of numbers.
Thank you, Dennis.
So you're back in the polling field. This is the first poll you've done on the governor's race here in Connecticut. What did you find?
Well, the poll's good news for Ned Lamont. He has a 13-point lead over Bob Stefanowski, but it's really early. We have over 2 months left for the campaign, and I'd say it's kind of like being in the first inning of a baseball game.
Looking at some of the polls you've done in years past, elections past, have we ever seen a gap that big?
Yes, in fact, in 2010, Tom Foley was in a similar position of Stefanowski, trailing by double digits. And as you probably remember, that turned out to be a real nail-biter. Foley lost by just a half a percentage point.
And of course, you had bigger poll gaps when Governor Rell was governor. She was ahead, I know, in one of her races. What else did you learn from this poll about the governor's race?
Well, I guess I'd highlight the gender gap, that men are evenly divided between the two candidates, but Lamont has a huge 2-to-1 lead over Stefanowski among women. So they're really playing a decisive role, and it's something that we've seen in our national polls as well. President Trump has hurt the Republican brand among women. We've seen huge gender gap for the generic vote nationally for President Trump, and I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing a lead here for Ned Lamont.
We'll get to President Trump a little bit later on. I want to ask you, in terms of this gender gap, the Republicans have an all-male ticket. Bob Stefanowski, Joe Markley, Republican Susan Weiss, who is very well-known. In fact, one of the most well-known candidates on the whole ballot, some would say, because she's been elected before. Does that help at all?
You know, I don't think people vote for lieutenant governor. They're really thinking about the gubernatorial candidate.
Well, in terms of the women?
Yeah, I don't think it makes much of a difference. I think the Democrats would be doing better among women regardless.
You also polled the president, his approval rating here in Connecticut, and the governors, Governor Malloy. How did that fare?
So they're both deeply unpopular, but what's interesting is the intensity. There's a lot more intensity among people when it comes to President Trump. They feel more strongly. They either strongly disapprove or strongly approve than the way they feel about Governor Malloy.
So Bob Stefanowski is behind right now. Were there any silver linings for him in the polling you did? Any other questions that were helpful to him?
Well, I guess when it comes to repealing the state income tax, that's something that has been central to his campaign. About half of voters favor that. On the other hand, only a third think it's realistic to phase out the income tax in 8 years.
What about, did you do any geographic polling in terms of different parts of the state where one is stronger than the other?
Yeah, you know what? Lamont leads pretty much across the board in all regions in the state.
Do Republicans have any strengths anywhere that you found in the poll?
Well,
sometimes they do well in the 5th district, the western part of the state.
I would say for Stefanowski, one of the hopeful signs for him is that he's doing pretty well among independents. It's not enough to overcome the big Democratic advantage in this state, but he has a small lead among independents.
As you look at some of these polling numbers compared to the last time you did a governor's poll, you know, they traditionally tend to narrow, correct, as we get closer to
sometimes. We'll have to see. I mean, right now, about 3 in 10 voters tell us they haven't heard enough about either candidate to form an opinion. So we'll see that it's going to be about defining, you know, themselves and their opponent. We'll see. I know you are sponsoring a debate. Those things have an impact.
From today.
So, you know, we'll keep an eye on things, but I would emphasize that people are, you know, somewhat aware of what's going on in the campaign, but they're not paying a lot of attention. It is the summer. And also, President Trump has pretty much sucked all the oxygen out of the room. So people aren't paying as much attention to state politics these days. So I would expect over the next couple of months, people to really start tuning in more, and we could see movement.
Independent candidate Oz Griebel was also in your poll. He was also polled 8 years ago when he ran as a Republican and seemed to do much better then than he is doing today. 4%, correct?
Yeah, he's only getting 4%. I think the key there is about 80% of people don't know enough about Oz Griebel to form an opinion.
It's interesting because there were so many ads over the summer between Stefanowski and Lamont, well, against their fellow party members, that you would think that there'd be more awareness with some of the voters.
Yeah, but also you got to remember with the independents, huge chunk of Connecticut's electorate really weren't paying much attention because we have the closed primaries. So, they weren't really in the game. They couldn't vote for the Democrat or for the Republican. So we see in our poll, they're telling us they've paid less attention to the campaign, they know less about the candidates. So it's sort of going to be a battle for the independent vote over the next 2 months.
Tell us how the polling is done, who is polled, and what kind of questions they're given.
Sure. So we think that there's really 3 things that are really important when it comes to gold standard methodology. Live interviewers, so we actually have real people making the calls. We call people on cell phones as well as landlines. This is really important because over half the population has only a cell phone, does not have a landline, and they tend to be disproportionately young people. So that's a really important one. For example, robopolls are not allowed by federal law to call people on their cell phone, so they're missing a lot of people, and especially young people. The third thing that I think is really important about what we do is we're completely transparent about what we do. So we put out how we did the poll, how many people we talked to, when we spoke to them, what were the questions that we asked. This is something that's really important in polling, is to disclose how you did the poll.
We have the entire poll on the Channel 3 app and on our website, WFSB.com. Doug Schwartz, we always enjoy having you here. When's the next poll? Do we have a hint?
Don't know yet.
Don't know yet.
Stay tuned.
Always top secret. We'll have you back on.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, sir. In a moment, how will the General Assembly deal with a Governor Lamont or a Governor Stefanowski? We'll ask them coming up. And also, the new MGM casino, it's open, so how will they be targeting Connecticut? We'll talk about that in just a moment as well.